If you were at a Christmas party and 30 out of 32 people raised their hands asking you to leave, what would you do? That's precisely what happened to me at the Christmas party held at my grandfather's house. My parents, my younger brother, my uncles and aunts, every single one of them wanted me gone. They kicked me out because, in their eyes, I was just a low-income truck driver, not worthy of sitting at the same table with them. But what shocked me the most was my grandfather's decision. His decision that day completely changed the lives of everyone at that party. Stay with me. I will tell you everything that happened at the party that day. It might just catch you off guard. Hello, everyone. My name is Caleb. I'm 32 years old. My wife, Claire, our daughter, Olivia, and I live in a house in the suburbs of Chicago. These days, we run a small trucking company with a fleet of 10 trucks. From the outside, people look at our life and think we're successful, like we've figured it out. But let me be honest. This house and the business we own today aren't the result of my hard work alone. I was a long-haul truck driver making around $4,000 monthly after taxes. My wife Claire worked as a sales assistant for a fashion brand, but her income was unstable and barely enough to rely on. Life was tough. We were renting a small 2-bedroom apartment in a not-so-safe part of Chicago, and the rent alone ate up nearly half my monthly income. We'd count every dollar toward the end of each month to ensure we had enough to care for Olivia. I remember some weeks I was behind the wheel for 14 hours a day, driving from Chicago down to Texas and back again to earn a few $100 in overtime. I'd get home at 2 or 3 in the morning, completely drained, wanting nothing more than to collapse into bed, but still had to be up again by 6 a.m. to get ready for the next trip. Meanwhile, Claire worked at a fashion store with a low base salary, mainly relying on commissions from sales. When business was slow, she'd bring home just $1,800 a month, so we often had to borrow money. Even on Olivia's 5th birthday, we could only manage a small party at home with a few cupcakes from the grocery store and some cheap toys. Seeing her smile so brightly at those little things warmed my heart and broke it simultaneously. And then, everything started to change after Christmas in 2023. The life I have today is, strangely enough, thanks in large part to my parents and relatives, and the way they look down on me. If it hadn't been for their judgment, I wouldn't be where I am now. To help you understand what I went through, I need to take you back to the day I got a phone call from my grandfather, exactly 1 week before Christmas. That day, I was returning to Chicago after spending 3 days hauling furniture for a company. When I saw Grandpa on my screen, I answered immediately through Bluetooth. His warm voice filled the cab of my truck, and for a moment, I didn't feel so alone on that long stretch of highway. After asking how I was doing and how work had been, he said in that gentle tone of his, "Caleb, next Sunday is Christmas. Bring Claire and Olivia over for dinner. 7 o'clock. I miss Olivia so much." Hearing his voice, so full of care, gave me a sense of comfort after all those exhausting days on the road. I told him we'd be there and hung up the call. My grandfather, Robert, was 78 that year, but still sharp as ever. He liked to host a family dinner at his house every few years to bring everyone together. He had 4 sons. My dad, Alan, was the oldest, followed by my uncles Philip, Alex, and Marcus. Uncle Philip was the show-off. He worked as a branch manager for an insurance company and never missed a chance to brag about the million-dollar contracts he just landed. Every time he saw me, he'd throw a smug question my way. "Still driving trucks, Caleb? When are you going to get a real job?" Then there was Uncle Alex, quieter, but his eyes always carried that look of disdain. He ran a small restaurant and had this habit of eyeing people up and down, then shaking his head like he could sum up someone's worth just by their clothes. But my dad, Alan, he was the worst of them all. Being the oldest, he saw himself as upholding the family name and acting like he had the right to judge everyone else. He ran a small construction business and loved to talk big about his projects, even though they were all just small gigs. The worst part was how ashamed he was of me. Every time someone asked about me, he'd say, "Let's not talk about him. His truck driving embarrasses me." Then he'd put on this wounded expression, like I'd somehow brought shame to the whole family. He even said it straight to my face once, "You driving a truck? You're an embarrassment. I can't show my face around my friends." If anyone asked what I did for a living at family gatherings, he'd dodge the question or switch the subject to brag about James, his golden child. The only one who treated me with any decency was Uncle Marcus. He was a grade school teacher, didn't make much, but always respected people. He once told me, "Your job doesn't define you. You're supporting your family with your 2 hands. And that's something to be proud of." Uncle Marcus was the only one I genuinely liked among Grandpa's sons. As for Philip, Alex, and especially my dad, I didn't care for any of them. To be honest, I hated them. But I still chose to attend that Christmas dinner because Grandpa had asked. I had no idea that saying yes to that invitation would completely change my life. That evening, after dinner, I told Claire and Olivia that we'd be spending Christmas at Grandpa Robert's house. Olivia, who was only 6 at the time, threw her arms around me in excitement and asked, "So I'm finally going to meet Great-Grandpa Robert, right, Daddy?" Seeing her so happy, I smiled and said, "That's right. He said he misses you a lot." Without missing a beat, Olivia ran over to Claire, hugging her tight and exclaiming, "Mommy, I'm going to draw a beautiful picture to give him." Watching her get so excited, I hoped she'd have a Christmas to remember that year. As soon as Olivia ran off to her room to start on her drawing, Claire looked at me, worry written all over her face. She walked over, leaned in, and asked quietly, "Are you sure we should go?" I knew exactly what she meant. Every time we'd gone to one of those family dinners before, I'd come back heavy, withdrawn, and silent for days. After a few seconds, I sat down on the couch and said, "I honestly don't know, but it's Grandpa's invitation. We can't say no." Claire sat beside me, gently took my hand and said, "You know I'm not afraid of what they'll say about us. I'm just worried about Olivia." Her words hit me hard. I had thought about that too. After nearly a minute of silence, I finally told her, "Maybe we should just stay for a little while. Wish Grandpa a Merry Christmas, then leave early." Claire nodded quietly. She didn't say another word. Over the next few days, I was torn. Part of me wanted to see Grandpa, the only person in the family who had ever shown me unconditional love. But another part of me dreaded being in the same room with my dad and uncles, dealing with their judgment, especially in front of my wife and daughter. The day before the party, I oversaw Olivia slide her drawing into a little gift bag, asking repeatedly about her great-grandpa. That's when I made up my mind. We were going to the party. No matter what happened, I'd protect my daughter, and no one would hurt her with their words. Around 4 in the afternoon on Christmas Day, we left Chicago and headed to Rockford. The drive took nearly 2 hours in our old car. During the ride, Olivia kept talking about the drawing she had made with Claire's help. She was so excited. "Daddy, I drew Great-Grandpa smiling, and there's a Christmas tree too." Just before we turned onto the familiar road to Grandpa's house, we quickly stopped at the bakery to pick up some apple pie, his favorite. We arrived at around 6. Plenty of cars were parked out front, including my parents' Accord and my younger brother James's brand new Civic. I figured they probably showed up early to parade their achievements around before I arrived. After finding a spot to park near the end of the street, we made our way to the house. The gate wasn't locked since it was Christmas and the party was in full swing, so we walked right in. Just as we reached the front door, I ran into James. He was standing nearby, beer in hand. He looked me up and down and said, dripping with sarcasm, "Well, look who decided to show up. Isn't that my big brother, the truck driver?" His words stung, but I said nothing. I just kept walking. Claire squeezed my hand tightly, and Olivia trailed behind us, unaware. When we stepped into the living room, I was surprised by how many people were there. Nearly 30, all talking and laughing loudly. Besides my parents, I saw the families of Uncle Philip, Uncle Alex, and Uncle Marcus all present. There were also some extended relatives like Aunt Katie, Uncle Derek, and a few unfamiliar faces I assumed were their kids or grandkids. It had been a long time since I'd seen most of them. The moment I walked in, Uncle Marcus greeted me with genuine warmth. "Caleb, you're late. Traffic?" I answered respectfully, "Yes, Uncle. The roads were a little busy today." He gave me a warm smile and added, "Go ahead and find a seat with your family. Grandpa will be out any minute." That moment of kindness from Uncle Marcus hit me deep. He wasn't my father, but he always made me feel more loved than my real dad ever did. Honestly, there were times I wished my father could be even half as kind as Uncle Marcus, but I knew that was never going to happen. As I looked for a place for us to sit, I could feel the eyes on us. Some people nodded and smiled politely, but others, I could see it clearly, looked at us with thinly veiled contempt. What I didn't know then was that my family would be asked to leave the party in just a few short minutes. As Claire, Olivia, and I were looking for a place to sit, a harsh voice suddenly cut through the noise, freezing the entire room. It was my father, Alan. He rose from a brown leather chair, stared straight at me with a cold, deadpan look and said, "In this house, seats are for people who've made something of themselves." My heart skipped a beat. I felt my face flush hot, blood rushing upward. but I forced myself to stay calm and asked, "What do you mean by that, Dad?" Before he could answer, James stepped in from behind, his voice soaked in contempt. "It means losers like you don't belong here." It felt like someone had slapped me across the face. Right there, in front of everyone. I glanced over at Claire, who was holding Olivia tightly. Her face had gone pale with shock. Then came clapping, slow, sarcastic claps from the left side of the room. Uncle Philip was sitting comfortably on the sofa with that smug grin. After a few mocking claps, he added with a voice full of disdain, "James is right. This room's full of achievers. You still planning on driving trucks for the rest of your life?" Before I could react, Uncle Alex jumped in too, his words like a knife. "Honestly, we're all a little embarrassed whenever someone asks what you do." The insults came one after another from my own family. I felt my composure slipping. It was like standing in the middle of a hostile circle, surrounded by people who saw me as nothing more than an eyesore. I looked down and saw Olivia trembling, clutching Claire's leg. Her big, innocent eyes were confused. She couldn't understand why everyone spoke so cruelly to her dad. Just as I was about to speak up and defend myself, Uncle Marcus rose from his seat in the corner of the room. He looked around at all of them, his eyes sharp and firm, and said loud and clear, "That's enough. It's Christmas. For God's sake." His voice cut through the tension like a blade. For a moment, I felt a small wave of relief, like someone had just reached a hand out to me while I was drowning. But the storm wasn't over. I could feel it. The silence followed was thick, almost choking. The entire room felt like a wire pulled tight, seconds away from snapping. While everyone was exchanging tense glances in the silence after Uncle Marcus spoke, slow, steady footsteps echoed from the hallway. Grandpa stepped out, his expression stern, yet carrying that usual calmness he was known for. He scanned the room, then raised his voice. "Marcus, that's enough. They're right." His words hit me like a bomb exploding in my head. I couldn't believe what I had just heard. Grandpa, the one person I still trusted in this family, was siding with them and siding with the ones who had just humiliated me. A few seconds passed. Then he turned to me, his eyes filled with what looked like sympathy. But there was something else in there too, something I couldn't quite read. He turned back to the rest of the room, and with a chilling calmness he said, "We'll take a vote. If you want Caleb out of this party, raise your hand." The room fell into a terrifying silence. Some people looked around, confused or unsure. Others seemed almost excited by the suggestion. Uncle Marcus stood up, face flushed with anger, and asked, "Are you serious, Dad?" Grandpa looked him dead in the eyes and said, "I'm not joking." That moment felt like the world collapsing around me. The air in the room grew heavy, and everyone seemed to hold their breath, waiting for this unthinkable vote to begin. A few seconds ticked by. My father, Alan, raised his hand firmly. He locked eyes with me as he did, his face cold and unflinching, like he had just claimed a long-awaited victory. Next was James. He lifted his hand with a smirk full of malice. He looked like he was enjoying this, like he'd been waiting for this moment for years. Then came Uncle Alex and Uncle Philip, both raising their hands at nearly the same time. Philip nodded, clearly pleased with himself, while Alex kept a stern expression, as if he were fulfilling some noble duty. Their families followed. Philip's wife, Janet, hesitated, but after glancing at her husband, she lifted her hand too. Alex's teenage kids, maybe 16 or 17, followed his lead, unsure and awkward, but they still went along with it. I turned to Claire and saw her clutching Olivia tightly. Her eyes were red and brimming with tears that hadn't yet fallen. Olivia, utterly unaware of what was happening, looked up at her mom and whispered, "Mommy, why is everyone raising their hands? Should I raise mine too?" Claire held her tighter, trying to keep the tears from slipping down her cheeks. I glanced around and saw a few hesitant hands. It was the distant relatives, people like Aunt Katie and Uncle Derek. They looked at each other, then at me, torn between decency and peer pressure. Aunt Katie looked at her husband, then Uncle Philip, uncertainty written all over her face. Uncle Derek bit his lip, his hand resting on his thigh like he was getting ready to vote, but he was still hesitating. Then Grandpa barked, his voice booming, "Come on, I don't have all day." That pressure broke the last bit of resistance. Those unsure hands went up one by one, quickly, almost like they'd been ordered to. I did a quick count in my head. 30 out of 32 people had raised their hands. Only Uncle Marcus and his wife, Aunt Catherine, stayed still. At that point, Marcus had had enough. His face was bright red with rage, fists clenched at his sides. He grabbed Catherine's hand and stormed toward the door. As he passed Grandpa, he stopped, looked him straight in the eyes, and said with quiet fury, "I'm honestly ashamed of you." Those words hung in the air like a sentence being passed. I had never heard Marcus speak to Grandpa like that before. Not once in my life. He then walked over to me, placed a hand gently on my shoulder, and said, "Let's go, Caleb. These people don't deserve to be called family." I was stunned. I had never seen Uncle Marcus like this, the kind man who always tried to keep the peace. Now standing up with a fire I'd never seen before, not wanting Claire and Olivia to endure more of this. I took their hands and followed Marcus out of the room. As we passed Grandpa, my heart was burning with resentment. He had invited me here, only to humiliate me in front of my wife and daughter. I kept asking myself, why would you give me hope to crush it like that? Behind me, I heard a few people snickering, like they had just watched the ending to some twisted little play. Olivia was still holding tightly to her drawing, not understanding why we had to leave so soon. As I looked at all the raised hands that voted me out of that room, I knew from that moment on, I no longer had a grandfather. No father. No family. A powerful voice rang behind us just as we were a few steps from the front door. "Stop right there." All of us froze instinctively at the commanding shout from Grandpa. Something in his voice, something forceful and undeniable, even made Uncle Marcus stop in his tracks, despite being seething with anger. A few tense seconds passed. The silence was so thick, I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Then Grandpa spoke again, this time louder, with unmistakable authority. "The ones who are leaving tonight are not you." Uncle Marcus and I turned back to look at him, completely confused. I had no idea what he was about to do, but there was something in his eyes, a strange fire I had never seen before. He turned toward the room to all the people still seated, the same ones who had just raised their hands to vote me out, and said coldly, "The ones who need to leave are the ones with their hands in the air." The room exploded. Voices rose in protest. Shouting came from every direction. My father leapt to his feet, yelling, "You've got to be kidding me. You can't do this." Uncle Philip and Uncle Alex chimed in, their voices panicked and loud. Philip, clearly rattled, asked, "Are you serious, Dad?" Alex took a step forward, trying to play the peacemaker. His tone turned soft, almost fake. "Dad, I just wanted to teach Caleb a little lesson. That's all. I didn't mean any harm." Distant relatives like Aunt Katie and Uncle Derek started fumbling for explanations. Aunt Katie, her voice shaking, said, "Uncle Robert, I only went along with the others. I didn't want to upset anyone. I wasn't trying to insult Caleb, I swear." Uncle Derek nodded quickly in agreement. "Yeah, that's right, sir. We just thought it was some family joke. We didn't realize how serious this was." But Grandpa shook his head slowly. His expression didn't soften, not even a little. He looked straight at my father, then at Philip and Alex, his eyes filled with bitter disappointment. "Since you were kids, I taught you that family is about love and loyalty, and now you are mocking Caleb because he's a truck driver." My dad was still trying to salvage the moment, desperate to twist the narrative. He stepped forward, frustration in his voice. "I don't look down on him, but he needs to take responsibility. He's 32 and still driving trucks. I was trying to motivate him to do better." Grandpa's stare turned ice cold. He looked directly at my dad and asked, "Alan, aren't you ashamed of yourself?" My father's face flushed red. He stared back defiantly and snapped, "Why should I be?" Grandpa paused for a moment. Then, with a heavy heart, he looked around the room and said, "Because 12 years ago, when you went bankrupt, Caleb, only 18, gave up college and became a truck driver. He didn't want to be a burden on you. And what did you do? Even while broke, you poured every last cent into James." That sentence hit like a bomb. The entire room fell silent. All eyes turned toward my father. James stood beside him, his face drained of color, finally realizing the truth had come out. The atmosphere turned suffocating. I stood there in stunned silence, overwhelmed by a flood of painful memories from 12 years ago. Claire squeezed my hand tightly, and Olivia still had no idea what was happening, quietly clutching the drawing she had made for her great-grandfather. Grandpa's words took me back to when I was 18, the year everything changed. That was the year our family went bankrupt after my dad's construction business ran into serious financial trouble. He was nearly $300,000 in debt, an overwhelming number for us back then. Wanting to help my parents, I made the hardest decision. I gave up college even though I had earned a scholarship. Instead of attending school, I got my commercial driver's license and started working as a long-haul truck driver. For the next 2 years, I worked nonstop. I covered James's high school tuition and most of the family's living expenses. Every month, I handed my entire paycheck to my mother, keeping only just enough for my basic needs. Then in 2015, when Grandpa gave my dad $400,000, he could finally pay off his debt and rebuild his business. I truly believed things would get better from there. But instead of thanking me for sacrificing my youth to support the family, my parents, and James, started looking down on me. Why? Because Dad's business partners didn't like the idea of his son driving a truck. They said it hurt the company's reputation. After a blowout argument at Christmas dinner in 2016, where Dad flat out told me he was ashamed to have a son who drove trucks, I cut all contact. From that point on, I never went back home. When Claire and I married, we kept it small, just a few close friends. When Olivia was born, I didn't tell anyone in the family. The most critical moments of my life, I lived through them alone. In all those years away from the family, I stayed in touch with only 2 people, Grandpa and Uncle Marcus. They were the only ones who truly understood and supported me. Both of them had tried to convince my parents to reconcile, but they refused to budge. Their condition was clear. I had to change careers to be welcomed back. But I had made up my mind too. Unless they gave me a sincere apology, I wasn't going back. Because now it wasn't just about me anymore, it was about Claire and Olivia. And I wouldn't let anyone treat them the way I had been treated. So standing there, hearing Grandpa speak those truths out loud, speaking of the sacrifices I made, it felt like someone finally saw it for the first time in years. Someone finally understood what I had gone through, and it meant more to me than I could ever put into words. Back at the party, after Grandpa reminded everyone of what had happened in the past, my father still refused to admit he was wrong. Instead, he doubled down, visibly irritated, and said to Grandpa in a defiant tone, "I raised him. It's only right that he pays me back. That's a child's duty." Hearing those words, Grandpa's face turned red with anger. At that moment, he no longer held back. He shook his head in bitter disappointment, then looked around the room with disgust in his eyes and said, "Today, I plan to divide my savings among you, but I've changed my mind. You don't deserve a dime." The moment Grandpa mentioned his savings, the mood in the room shifted again. Panic spread like wildfire. Voices rose all at once. Yelling, protests, confusion. My dad shot to his feet, shouting, "What are you talking about? That's our inheritance." James stepped forward, his voice shaking. "Grandpa, you can't do this. This isn't fair." Grandpa raised a hand sharply, signaling for silence. "Enough," he commanded, his voice deep and unwavering. Then, with calm authority, he said, "The $4 million will be divided between Marcus and Caleb." The words had barely left his mouth when Uncle Philip exploded. "What? $4 million?" Grandpa nodded, replying evenly, "Yes, I sold half the farm 2 months ago. I would split the money equally among my 4 sons and 6 grandchildren. That would have been $400,000 each. But after what I saw today, none of you deserves it." That was when the real panic hit. My father dropped to his knees in front of Grandpa, clutching his hands desperately. "Dad, I'm sorry. I was wrong. Please, give me one more chance." Uncles Alex and Philip jumped in, pleading their cases. "Dad, we were just trying to push Caleb to do better. We didn't mean to insult him." James, sobbing now, ran up to me and grabbed my arm. "I'm so sorry, Caleb. I was wrong. Please forgive me." But it was too late. Grandpa looked at them with an expression like stone. Cold, unmoved, and absolute. His decision had been made, and nothing was going to change it. I stood there, stunned, feeling like I was in a dream. $4 million, a number I had never even dared to imagine. Seeing that they still refused to leave, Grandpa raised his voice with authority. "Get the hell out of my house. Now." Immediately, my father shouted back in rage, "You can't do this. We'll take you to court." Uncle Philip chimed in, his tone sharp and threatening. "You're old, Dad. We can prove you're not mentally fit to manage your assets." Then James burst out, yelling in frustration, "This is bullshit. I'm not letting this happen." But Grandpa just let out a dry, mocking chuckle, the kind of laugh that stopped them cold. Then, in a calm and almost amused voice, he said, You are fools. Did you forget I still have half the farm left? I'm transferring the deed to Marcus and Caleb in 2 days. His words hit them like a bucket of ice water. They suddenly realized they hadn't just lost $4 million. There was still another half of the farm, easily worth at least $3 million more, and now that too would be out of reach. Knowing they were out of chances, they fell silent. One by one they left, seething, defeated, bitter. Just before walking out the door, my father turned back, looked me dead in the eye with pure hatred, and said coldly, "You happy now, Caleb? You've torn this family apart." I didn't respond. I just pulled Claire and Olivia in close and held them tight. After they left, the house fell into a strange, peaceful silence. Only 6 people remained in our family: Uncle Marcus and Grandpa. Looking over the untouched food still spread across the dinner table, Grandpa turned to us and said, "Let's keep just enough for the 6 of us. The rest, help me pack it up. We'll take it to the homeless." This wasn't leftover food. It had been freshly delivered by a high-end restaurant earlier that afternoon. No one had touched it. The dinner was supposed to start at 7 p.m., but by 6:30, Grandpa had already sent everyone else home. We all moved quickly without wasting time to help him pack the food and load it into the back of Uncle Marcus's pickup. There were enough roasted chickens, bread, salads, desserts, and soda bottles to feed dozens. Olivia excitedly joined in as we packed and looked up at me curiously. "Daddy, who are we giving the food to?" I gently brushed her hair back and smiled. "To people who need it, sweetie. Hungry people don't have a home to return to." The 6 of us then got into 2 cars and drove toward the downtown area of Rockford, where we knew many homeless people gathered. It was a place I remembered from years ago, a place full of people just trying to survive. When we arrived, Olivia looked around, wide-eyed at the men and women sitting along the sidewalks in worn-out clothes. She held my hand tightly and whispered, "Daddy, why don't they have a house?" I knelt beside her, looked into her eyes, and answered softly, "There are lots of reasons, sweetheart, but what matters is that we can help them." Claire and Aunt Catherine began handing out the meals, while Grandpa and Uncle Marcus initiated quiet conversations with some people there. At first, Olivia was shy, but soon, she began offering boxes of cookies on her own. Tiny hands, full of kindness. The smiles, the warm thank yous, and especially the look of quiet gratitude in one older man's eyes as he received his dinner. It told us everything we needed to know. We were doing the right thing. After we handed out the last meal, Olivia ran up to me and wrapped her arms around my waist. With joy in her voice, she said, "Daddy, I'm thrilled." Everyone smiled so nicely when they got their food. And that's when it hit me. This right here was the most meaningful Christmas my family had ever had. Around 8 o'clock, we returned to Grandpa's house and finally sat down to eat together. Only 6 of us were there, but the warmth and joy around the table made it feel fuller than ever. As everyone gathered, Olivia reached into her little bag and pulled out the drawing she'd been saving. She walked over and handed it to Grandpa with a proud smile. He held it up, inspecting it closely, then smiled warmly and said, "This is beautiful. I will hang it on the living room wall so everyone can see it." Hearing his praise, Olivia clapped her hands excitedly. "I drew you with a big smile, Great-Grandpa," she said, beaming. A little later, Claire brought out the apple pie we had picked up earlier, and we all enjoyed dessert together. After we finished dinner, Grandpa suggested we move into the living room to talk for a bit. He stepped into his office and returned holding 2 checks, each written for $2 million. When he handed me one, my hands trembled so badly I was afraid I might drop it. Uncle Marcus was just as stunned, his hands shaking as he took his, eyes wide with disbelief. We both turned to Grandpa, completely overwhelmed with gratitude. I could barely get the words out. "Thank you, Grandpa. I don't even know how to express how grateful I am." Grandpa nodded and then continued, his voice calm but serious. "In a few days, I'm transferring ownership of the remaining part of the farm to the 2 of you." We stared at him, stunned. The remaining land was worth several million more. Seeing the look on our faces, Grandpa let out a long sigh and said, "I don't trust the others anymore. You 2 are the only ones who deserve to carry on what I've built." Hearing that, my heart sank a little. Not because of the money, but because of everything we had lost as a family to get to this point. I looked at Grandpa, my voice shaking. "Grandpa, I know this must have hurt you deeply, having to decide." Uncle Marcus nodded in agreement and added, "Dad, I never wanted it to come to this either. Grandpa rested a hand on my shoulder and said, gently but firmly, Caleb, I've watched them for years. Today was just the final straw. I know who has a good heart and who I can trust. Hearing those words, I lowered my head, flooded with emotion, grateful for his trust, and at the same time, feeling the weight of the responsibility he was placing in my hands. That night, in the guest bedroom at Grandpa's house, I lay next to Claire and Olivia, my mind tangled in a web of emotions. On one hand, I felt a deep sense of relief and gratitude, finally being seen and supported in a way I never imagined. But on the other hand, there was a lingering sadness I couldn't shake, the painful truth that our family had completely fallen apart. Once Olivia had drifted off to sleep, Claire turned toward me and whispered, I still can't believe this is real. I squeezed her hand gently and whispered back, me neither, but we have to use this money wisely. We can't let it change who we are. After a quiet moment, we agreed, no bragging, no showing off. We would use this gift to build something better, something lasting, for our little family. The next morning, just as Claire and I returned to our apartment in Chicago, we were met with an unpleasant surprise. Waiting in the lobby, near the elevator, were my parents and James. Faces tense, postures stiff with determination. They rushed over the moment they saw me, demanding that I split the $2 million I had received into 4 equal parts. They claimed it was only fair. I saw no reason to argue. With a cold, firm tone, I looked them straight in the eye and said, if you think you have a case, take it to court. But I'm not giving you a single cent. Hearing that, my father exploded. He began yelling, calling me ungrateful, greedy, selfish. Every insult he could hurl. His words were sharp and vicious, aimed to wound. But I wasn't going to stand there and take it. Without another word, I turned around, held Claire and Olivia's hands tightly, and walked straight into the elevator. A building security guard stepped in just in time to keep them from following us. That same afternoon, Claire and I made a firm decision. We changed our phone numbers. We gave the new ones only to Grandpa and Uncle Marcus, the only people we still wanted in our lives. It wasn't an easy choice, but we knew it was the only way to protect our peace. We couldn't let selfish, toxic people continue to invade the life we were trying to build. After receiving the money, I didn't rush into wasting it. Instead, I decided the first investment I should make was in myself. I used the first $10,000 to enroll in a business and asset management program at a community college in Chicago. For 3 months, I studied the fundamentals of accounting, human resource management, marketing, and business strategy. Most nights, after finishing my trucking shifts, I'd stay up late studying, determined to gain the skills I knew I lacked. When the course ended, I began taking the first steps toward a dream I had held onto for years, starting my own trucking company. The first order of business was finding a warehouse and a small office space. I visited dozens of locations before finally settling on a modest warehouse on the outskirts of town that offered a fair rental rate. On opening day, there were no banners or lavish celebrations. Grandpa, Uncle Marcus, and their families stood with me for a simple ribbon cutting in front of the warehouse. And honestly, that was more than enough. Seeing Grandpa smiling proudly beside me, I knew I was on the right path. This wasn't just the beginning of a business. It was proof that I could stand on my own 2 feet and build something meaningful with Grandpa's trust in me. The early challenges were real. Getting licenses, securing truck insurance, and hiring reliable drivers kept me up at night. There were moments when I nearly gave up, like when a major client backed out because they thought my company was too small and inexperienced. But with every setback came a lesson. I learned how to deliver a stronger presentation when I lost a client. When a driver quit unexpectedly, I learned how to build a backup team. Every problem became an opportunity to grow. Throughout this entire journey, Grandpa and Uncle Marcus were like my personal advisory board. With his years of business experience, Grandpa would call often to walk me through customer negotiations. Uncle Marcus helped me review contracts and offered guidance on managing finances wisely. Thanks to their support and mentorship, I slowly gained more confidence and experience, and eventually I began expanding the business. It's been a year and a half since that Christmas party, the night that changed my life forever. Today, my company has grown beyond anything I could have imagined. We now operate with 10 long-haul trucks and a team of 20 dedicated employees. With the steady income from the business, we moved out of that cramped apartment and into a cozy 2-story home in Naperville, just outside of Chicago. It has a big backyard where Olivia can run free, a quiet office for me to work in, and a spacious living room with a fireplace. Our favorite spot to gather on weekends. Olivia is now 7 and in second grade. She's doing incredibly well in school, and I couldn't be prouder. Claire has left her sales job and now devotes herself to caring for our family and helping me manage the company's accounting. My relationship with Grandpa and Uncle Marcus has grown even stronger. Every weekend, we drive out to Rockford to visit Grandpa. He's 80 now, still sharp as ever, always ready with solid business advice. He keeps the drawing Olivia gave him proudly framed and hanging on his wall, showing it off to every visitor like it's a masterpiece. Uncle Marcus, meanwhile, has become our unofficial financial advisor. He helps me review major contracts and plan for future expansions. As for my parents, I hadn't seen or heard from them since that day. I assumed I never would, but I was wrong. Yesterday, out of nowhere, they showed up at my front door, pale, worn down, and desperate. I don't know how they got my address. This time, there were no insults, no shouting, just pleading. They came asking for $400,000. Money they needed to save their home. My father had made another bad business decision, investing in a shady real estate deal. He'd mortgaged the house and now couldn't pay it back. Through all their sweet words and teary apologies, I didn't feel moved. Instead, I gave them a simple condition. I said, "If you can tell me my birthday, I'll help." 5 minutes of painful silence followed. They looked at each other, tried to remember, but couldn't. My dad said he thought it was sometime in October. James guessed the 15th. No one remembered that my birthday is December 23rd. They lived with me for 18 years, and none of them knew. I saw the disappointment settle into their faces. I said nothing more. I closed the door, calmly, no anger, just indifference. Later, I told Grandpa the whole story over the phone. His warm voice came through. "Well done, Caleb. I'm proud of you. And now, to those of you listening to this story, what do you think? Was I right or wrong to turn them away? I'd love to hear your thoughts. If this story meant something to you, don't forget to subscribe and join me on the next part of this journey. Thank you sincerely for being here. Can you believe it? 2 years ago, when I graduated from college, the only bouquet I received was the one my parents brought. On top of that, I had to use my savings to take them out for a celebratory meal. But fast forward 2 years, when it was my younger brother's turn to graduate, they threw a party at a fancy restaurant. And after the celebration, they even asked me to split the bill. After witnessing their favoritism time and time again, I finally decided to walk away from my family. Some people say I did the right thing. Others say I was wrong because family members are supposed to support each other. What do you think? Listen to my story and share your thoughts with me. Hello, my name is Mark. I'm 25 years old and have worked as a financial professional for 3 years. I used to live with my parents, thinking it was expected that the family would stick together and support one another. But a year ago, I realized that no matter how hard I tried, I would never measure up to my younger brother in my parents' eyes. None of my efforts were ever acknowledged, while Stephen was always favored and protected. That was when I decided I needed a life of my own, a place where I no longer had to prove my worth to those who never truly appreciated it. A year ago, on the day of Stephen's graduation, I remember that morning vividly. As I sipped my coffee before heading to work, my mom called me to the living room. My dad was already sitting there while Stephen was still asleep upstairs. They told me Stephen had a graduation party that evening, and I had to be there. Not an invitation, not a warm family conversation, just a command. We've already reserved a table. Be there by 6 p.m. And don't forget to bring a gift for your brother. I hesitated for a moment. Party? When I graduated, did I get anything? No celebration, no gifts, not even a simple congratulations. I had to manage everything on my own. Earning my degree, finding a job, and I never asked them for anything. Sensing my silence, my mom added, "You're his older brother, after all. You should at least bring something. If you don't have a gift, then don't bother coming and embarrassing the family." I let out a small, dry laugh. I see how it is. I didn't argue. I stood up, grabbed my car keys, and went to work as usual. But in my mind, a plan was already forming. If a gift were that important, I would ensure it was truly unforgettable. The entire day, I was busy with work, but in the back of my mind, I kept thinking about the party my parents had ordered me to attend. After all, Stephen was still my brother, so I got him a special gift, a brand new MacBook worth nearly $2,000. I wanted to make the moment memorable, so I arranged for it to be delivered to the party. I pictured the scene. The delivery person walking in, handing Stephen the package in front of everyone. It would be a meaningful gesture, even though my family had never done anything like that for me. At 6 p.m., I left the office and drove to the Grand Oak, a high-end restaurant downtown. The moment I walked in, I immediately noticed something. The place was packed. They had invited over 50 people. Stephen's friends, distant relatives, my parents' colleagues, even people I had never seen before. The long tables were neatly arranged, every seat filled, and each guest had their place, except for me. And then my parents saw me. They stepped forward, their faces showing no surprise or happiness at my arrival. My mom crossed her arms and shook her head slightly. "You're late. There are no seats left." I frowned, glancing around. There was still an empty seat near Stephen. I pointed at it and asked, "What about that one?" She followed my gaze, then turned back to me and said firmly, "That seat is taken. One of Stephen's friends is coming." I let out a small laugh. An hour ago, I didn't even know I was supposed to be there, yet somehow they had already assigned a seat for someone arriving later than me. Oh, so Stephen's friend gets a seat even though they're late, but I, who came earlier, don't? My dad nodded as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. But my mom had already lost interest in the discussion. She crossed her arms, her expression full of irritation. "Where's Stephen's gift? Honestly, I think you should leave. You're late and you didn't even bring a present." Murmurs started spreading around the room. "He came without a gift? He's the older brother. He should have at least brought something." No gift, but still expecting to sit down and eat? I heard every word, every judgmental whisper from Stephen's friends, from distant relatives. People who had never cared about me before but now suddenly felt entitled to criticize me. I just smiled. A smile with no warmth, no amusement. And then, right at that moment, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. A call from the Apple Store delivery guy. I picked up. "Hello? I'm outside the Grand Oak. I have a delivery for a MacBook. Should I bring it in now?" I replied, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Yes, please bring it in." The moment the delivery guy walked into the restaurant and stood beside me, every pair of eyes turned toward us. I took a deep breath, stepped forward, and spoke loud enough for the entire table to hear. "Stephen, this is your gift. A MacBook." The room erupted in murmurs. Stephen looked up, his eyes widening in shock. He stared at me, then at the package in the delivery guy's hands, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Seriously?" His voice was filled with excitement and disbelief. The people around us began to murmur in admiration. I glanced at my parents. They were beaming with pride as if they had just accomplished something great. My mother leaned in and whispered to a distant relative, "See? I told you Mark would never show up empty-handed." My father crossed his arms and nodded approvingly. "Guess we misjudged him. He knows his responsibilities after all." I looked around the room, taking in their satisfaction, the smugness and self-congratulatory relief that I had done what was expected. I smirked slightly, then calmly added, "But I don't think you need it anymore." The room fell silent. Stephen froze, the smile vanishing from his face. My mother's expression stiffened, her eyes narrowing in confusion. My father raised an eyebrow, clearly trying to process what was happening. I turned to the delivery guy, my voice steady but firm. "I'm sorry, but I want to cancel this order." The delivery guy blinked, momentarily caught off guard, but quickly regained his professionalism. He nodded, pulled out his phone, and called the store. The entire table sat in stunned silence. The murmurs from before had disappeared entirely, replaced by a thick tension in the air. The delivery guy hung up a minute later and looked at me politely. "The store has confirmed the cancellation. You'll be charged a 5% fee, but the remaining amount will be refunded to your account within 3 to 5 business days." I smiled lightly. That's fine. Thank you. He gave me a slight nod before turning and exiting the restaurant. The moment the delivery guy walked out, the table erupted. Stephen was the first to react. He shot up from his seat, his chair screeching against the floor. Are you insane? Are you joking? Why the hell did you cancel it? My dad slammed his hand on the table, his face red with rage. What the hell are you doing, Mark? Are you trying to humiliate this family in front of everyone? My mom's mouth hung open, her expression a mix of shock and fury. What is wrong with you? Why would you pull such a ridiculous stunt? I knew it. I knew you couldn't just be decent for once. Stephen yelled, his face flushed with anger. You did this just to embarrass me in front of my friends, didn't you? The murmurs from the table grew louder. Stephen's friends, distant relatives. Everyone stared at me, whispering, pointing, judging. I looked at each of them, listening to every word. But I didn't get angry. I didn't react. I didn't argue. I just stayed silent. Without another word, I turned around and walked out of the restaurant. Right before leaving, I said, I didn't have a seat at this table, so there was no reason for me to spend $2,000 on Stephen, or on this family. After leaving the party, I didn't go home right away. Instead, I drove straight to a familiar coffee shop. A quiet place, never too crowded, where no one knew me. I ordered an Americano, found a secluded corner, and sank into my seat, letting my body relax. The air was filled with the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee and soft music played by the speakers. I stared blankly at the wooden table before me, my mind empty. But the memories started flooding back within minutes, like an old film playing in slow motion. As a child, I had already realized that I was never the favored one. When I won first place in the school's math competition, my parents patted my shoulder and said, "Good job, son." But when Stephen won a bronze medal in a district soccer tournament, they threw a party, invited relatives to celebrate, and bought him a new pair of cleats. By high school, the favoritism became even more apparent. When I scored the highest in my class on the final exams, my parents didn't even mention it. But when Stephen nearly failed a subject and barely passed after a retake, they took him out for a lavish dinner, saying he had worked so hard. And then came college. I never asked my parents for a single cent. I secured scholarships and worked 3 jobs simultaneously to cover tuition and living expenses. Stephen, when he got into college, my parents bought him a used car for convenience, paid all his tuition, and even gave him a monthly allowance. And I remember my graduation day perfectly. There was no party for me, no celebration, not even a simple congratulations. They only asked me one thing, so, where are you taking us out to eat? I spent $500 on that dinner. Money I had scrimped and saved from my part-time jobs. I didn't want to spend it, but I told myself that family is family. Maybe they deserve it. But that dinner felt like nothing more than an ordinary meal. No one mentioned how hard I had worked. No one said they were proud of me. And then I got my first job. Before receiving my first paycheck, my parents called me to the living room on my first day. Starting this month, you'll pay $2,000 for rent and living expenses. I was stunned. $2,000? This isn't a 5-star hotel. You have a job now, so it's your responsibility to contribute. Stephen is still in school and doesn't have an income yet. Your father and I are getting older, and work isn't what it used to be. You need to help support the family. My mom said it without a hint of hesitation. Without missing a beat, I told them I'd move out. I could rent a much nicer apartment with that amount of money. After a brief discussion, my parents exchanged glances and lowered the price to $1,000. I agreed, not because I was afraid to move out, but because I still believed that staying with family was the better choice. Despite the unfairness, I still thought they were my family. And now, after everything, I've come to a simple yet bitter realization. No matter how hard I try, they will never acknowledge me. If I stay, I'll be nothing more than an ATM, always there when they need money but never truly valued. I have to break free from this cycle. The sooner, the better. And so I started planning my exit. This time I wouldn't announce it. I wouldn't ask for permission. I wouldn't wait for anyone's approval. That night, I came home at 10 p.m., later than usual. It had been a long day. I only wanted peace. But as soon as I stepped inside, I saw my parents waiting in the living room. I braced myself, expecting them to lash out about what had happened at the party. But they didn't yell. They didn't explode with anger. Instead, they apologized. My mom looked at me, her expression softer than it had been at the restaurant. Her voice was unusually gentle. I know you weren't happy today. We should have saved a seat for you. I'm sorry. My dad nodded in agreement. We're family. We can work through this. We don't want you to feel left out. I felt my resolve waver for the first time in a long while. Maybe, had I been too harsh? Maybe they hadn't meant to treat me this way? But just as I started to let my guard down, my father continued. Stephen was distraught that you canceled his gift. He was looking forward to it so much, and in the end, he got nothing. My dad paused, looking at me with the calm, calculated tone of someone making a reasonable request. So, instead of the MacBook, you could make it up to him another way. The dinner bill tonight was $4,600. We'll consider the matter settled if you cover half, $2,300, as a graduation gift. I looked at him, then at my mother. So this was why they had waited up for me. They weren't genuinely sorry. They didn't care about how I felt. They just wanted another way to take my money. I laughed. But this time, there was no hesitation in my voice. No, one word. Firm. Final. My mother's smile disappeared. My father frowned. Mark, don't be selfish, my mom said, her voice no longer gentle. Family helps each other. That's how it should be. Yes, I replied, but helping isn't the same as being used. What are you even saying? My father's patience began to wear thin. You make the most money in this family. Are you saying you can't contribute a little? Do you know how hard we work to care for you and Stephen? I cut him off. You didn't take care of me. I've been taking care of myself for a long time. The room grew tense. And then you wonder why you always feel so distant from this family. My mother snapped. You're the one who keeps pulling away. You never try to connect with us. You can't even be generous with your brother. I met her gaze, unwavering. And were you ever generous with me? She froze. I took a step forward, my voice calm but sharp. When I graduated with honors, what did you do? Silence. I continued, my words cutting through the air like a knife. You bought me a cheap bouquet and told me to plan my celebration. Then you made me pay for dinner. My mother opened her mouth to argue, but nothing came out. My father sat still, his brow furrowed, visibly uncomfortable. And Stephen? I let out a dry laugh. He had a regular graduation, and you threw him a massive party with over 50 guests. Did I have a seat at that table? No. But his late arriving friends did. Did I get him a gift? Yes. But because I refused to pay for the entire dinner, now I'm the selfish one. My father cleared his throat, searching for an excuse. We didn't throw a party for you because we knew you were independent. You didn't need us to. I scoffed. Right? Because I took care of myself, you used it as an excuse to ignore me. And because Stephen never had to be independent, you used that to keep spoiling him. The weight of my words hung in the air. My parents had no rebuttal. But I knew it wasn't because they understood. They didn't know what else to say. I exhaled slowly. If you're only apologizing to ask for money, then there's nothing left to discuss. With that, I turned and walked straight to my room, ignoring the voices calling after me. I was too tired for this fight. But one thing was sure. I was leaving this house. I thought that after everything, things would finally settle down, that they would stop demanding things from me. But I was wrong. My parents made another request 2 days after Stephen's graduation party. This time, they wanted me to give my car to Stephen. His car is old, son. He needs a newer one to apply for jobs and commute to work. I stared at them briefly, forcing myself to stay calm. Then, in a slow, deliberate voice, I asked, "Are you serious?" My mom nodded without hesitation. "You started working before Stephen. You can help him out a little." My dad crossed his arms, adding, "Exactly. You're the older brother. You should support your sibling." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so ridiculous I almost couldn't believe it. This car? I saved for 6 months to buy it. My voice dripped with sarcasm. I worked, budgeted every penny, and earned it. And Steven? He's never had to save for anything, and now he gets to demand this? My dad's tone hardened. He was running out of patience. Steven just graduated. He doesn't have money. He needs a car to get to interviews and secure a good job. You already have a steady income, you can buy another one. I shrugged. If he needs a car, he can drive his old one a little longer. Or he can learn to save up like I did. I paused for a moment before continuing, my voice calm and steady. But if you want him to have my car, you can buy it from me. For a second, my father's face paled. Then he exploded. What did you just say? He slammed his hand on the table, making my mom flinch. You're asking us to pay to help your brother? No. I met his gaze without hesitation. If you want me to help, at the very least, it should be fair. Fair. My father's face turned red with fury. You want to talk about fairness? With your brother? I didn't respond. I was exhausted from this conversation before it even began. My father shot up from his seat, pointing a finger directly at me. His voice thundering through the room. Get out of my house. Silence. My mother looked stunned. Steven, who had been quiet the whole time, sat frozen in shock. I wasn't surprised. If anything, it felt like I was watching a play where I knew the ending. I took a deep breath and nodded. All right. Then I turned and walked straight to my room, without looking back. This time, I didn't need to argue. They had just decided for me. 30 minutes later, I dragged 2 suitcases downstairs. I didn't need much. Clothes, a few personal items, important documents, only the essentials. I left behind anything that tied me to this house. I didn't want to take a single reminder of this place with me. Without looking back, I walked to the door. My father's voice rang behind me as my hand touched the doorknob. Let's see how you survive without family. I paused for a second. Not because his words shook me, they didn't, but because, in that moment, I realized something. This is how they saw me. In their eyes, I needed this family to survive. I couldn't exist without them. I couldn't be happy without them. But they were wrong. I didn't say a word. I opened the door, stepped outside, and shut it behind me, closing an entire chapter of my life. I walked straight to my car, threw my suitcases into the trunk, started the engine, and drove away. I never looked back. A week later, I rented a cheap hotel room, a temporary place to stay while searching for a more permanent home. The room was small, nothing special, but at least it was mine. No more arguments, judgmental stares, or unreasonable demands. For the first time in a long while, I felt light. And then luck found me. After nearly 10 days of searching, I found the perfect apartment. 50 square meters, just the right size to live comfortably. Not too big, not too small. But most importantly, it was mine. A place I could truly call home. The rent was reasonable, only $500 a month. I had enough space to rest, work, and, most importantly, be free. In the following days, my life finally started to feel like my own. I no longer woke up feeling weighed down. No more nagging every morning. No more people barging into my space with absurd demands. I no longer had to calculate how much of my paycheck would go to someone else. Every dollar I earned, every effort I put in was now for me. I spent time decorating my apartment and organizing my life how I wanted. I focused on my career and planned my finances, and I had time to relax for the first time in years. Reading books, watching movies, and enjoying the little things I had never allowed myself to. 6 months after I left, Steven still didn't have a job. He was still living off my parents, free from financial worries, with no pressure to be independent. I had grown used to the quiet of living alone until my mom called me one day. It was the first time she had reached out in 6 months. Her voice was softer than usual. I miss you, Mark. It's been so long since you came home. Can we meet up? I was surprised but didn't ask any questions. I agreed. She suggested a cafe downtown, a place we had never been before. And the moment I arrived, I understood why. It wasn't just her. My father was there, and so was Steven. Once again, I had walked into a family meeting I hadn't been informed about. My mother smiled, acting as if this were just a casual reunion. How have you been? Work going well? Something felt off. My parents never asked about my well-being unless they wanted something. I didn't bother playing along. I looked my mother straight in the eye and said, my voice calm and direct, just get to the point. She flinched slightly but quickly recovered. With a sigh, she spoke carefully. Can you lend us $50,000? I raised an eyebrow, still processing her words. My father cleared his throat and added, Stephen wants to open a cafe. He has a great idea, but bank loans have ridiculous interest rates. If you could lend us the money for a year, we promise to pay it back in full. I turned to Stephen. He sat there, trying to look serious, but I could see the eagerness in his eyes. I let out a short laugh, shaking my head. Really? I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. He's never earned a single dollar, but you expect me to believe he can run a business? My mother's voice turned desperate. Stephen has grown up, Mark. He needs a chance. Can't you help him this one time? We're family. Stephen said, I'll pay it back as soon as I make a profit. This is my big opportunity, bro. I kept smiling, but in my mind, everything was clear. If I gave them this money, I would never see it again. I shook my head. No. My father immediately lost his temper. Stop being so selfish, Mark. His voice rose. All you ever think about is yourself. Are you jealous of your brother? Afraid he'll be more successful than you? I looked at him, my expression unreadable. All right, I'll do it. Their reactions were immediate. My mother's face lit up. Stephen sighed in relief. My father instantly calmed down, his tone shifting back to warmth. That's right, son. Family helps each other. But I wasn't finished. I smiled and continued, I'll lend you $50,000. No interest. But I paused, letting the weight of my words settle. You and Stephen have to sign a loan agreement. The collateral will be the house you're living in. The house becomes mine if you don't pay me back in a year. The cafe went silent. My mother's mouth hung open. My father's eyes widened in disbelief. Stephen sat frozen. I remained seated, smiling as if we were having a pleasant conversation. Well, we're family. You believe in Stephen's success, don't you? So this shouldn't be a problem. My father opened his mouth, then closed it again. He stared at me, searching for a way out. But in the end, all he could say was, I have no son like you. I wasn't surprised. Those words didn't hurt me anymore. I shrugged, stood up, grabbed my coat, and said, That's your choice. Goodbye. No one stopped me as I walked out. No one called after me, and I wasn't expecting them to. After that day, I cut all contact. No more calls. No more messages. No more guilt trips, demands, or manipulative performances. I moved forward with my life, and I have no regrets. Until a week ago, I ran into my cousin, Emily. We weren't particularly close, but we kept in touch occasionally. She sighed when she saw me, shaking her head as if she didn't know where to begin. Do you know what's been happening with your family? She asked. I shrugged. Not really, but go ahead. Emily lowered her voice, her expression tinged with regret. They're in bad shape. Stephen's cafe went under after just 3 months, no customers, huge losses. In the end, he had to sell it off. I wasn't surprised. I had seen it coming. Stephen had never earned a dollar on his own. I never managed anything. His failure was inevitable. And there's more, Emily continued. Your parents are selling the house to pay off his debts. They have no choice, they're looking for a smaller place to move into. I took a sip of my coffee, silent for a moment. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel regret. This was simply the result of their choices. My parents had chosen Stephen. They had bet everything on him. And now they were paying the price. I looked at Emily and gave a faint smile. I gave them a chance. Emily nodded but didn't say anything else. I stood up, giving her a light pat on the shoulder. If they ask about me, tell them this, I'm doing just fine. And I'm not coming back. Even though Emily understood my side, I knew plenty of people still sided with Stephen and my parents. They believed that I should sacrifice for my brother as the older sibling. If I were earning money first, I would have an obligation to help the one who wasn't. And honestly, I agree, but only if it's a real family. A family where parents treat all their children reasonably instead of favoring one and turning the other into an ATM. A family where help comes from love, not from guilt, manipulation, or obligation. Do you agree with me? Leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this story if it resonates with you. Thank you for reading. See you next time. So you're still washing cars, huh? My sister said loudly, her voice dripping with sarcasm after 15 years of not seeing me. 15 years apart. I thought maybe they'd changed, perhaps they'd see me differently. But no, nothing had changed. The same condescending attitude, the same judgment. Stick around and hear my story. See how I gave them a lesson they won't forget. Hello everyone, my name is John Hamilton. I'm 33 years old and living in the suburbs of New York with my wife, Alina, and our two beautiful daughters, Emma, who's 5, and Grace, who's 3. They're my whole world. I'm the second child in a family that always revolved around my sister, Everly. She's 2 years older than me, and ever since we were kids, she's been the center of every party, every family gathering, every compliment. Not wanting to live in her shadow, I left home at 18, right after I asked my parents for help with college tuition, and they turned me down. From that day on, I promised myself I'd never go back. And for 15 years, I kept that promise. Until about a month ago, it was a regular weeknight. I was working on plans to open a new branch of my business when my phone rang. I looked at the screen, an unknown number. I almost left it on voicemail, but something told me to pick it up. Then a woman's voice came through. John, is that you? I froze. That voice. There was no mistaking it. I hadn't heard it in 15 years, but I still remembered every little tone in how she said my name. Mom! I blurted out, surprised and a little shaken. Yes, it's me. Her voice cracked. I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I just wanted to know if you're okay. I was silent for a few seconds, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I couldn't believe this was happening. How did you get my number? I asked, my voice dropping. I've been keeping up with you quietly, she said softly. I still hear bits and pieces through some of the relatives. The ones you used to talk to before cutting ties. I never called before because you didn't want to hear from me. But this time is different. I closed my eyes, trying to keep my voice steady. What's different? She replied right away. Everly's birthday is next week. She's turning 35. We're throwing a small party at her place. Almost the whole family will be there. I thought, it would be nice if you came too, just this once, so everyone can see you again. I didn't answer right away. On the other end, she waited. After 15 years, now they suddenly want a reunion? With me, the one they cast aside like I never mattered? After a few seconds, I finally said, I'll think about it, Mom. Then I hung up. I sat frozen on the couch, still holding my phone loosely in one hand, the screen already dark. The call was over, but my mom's words kept echoing in my head. 15 years. And she just called me like nothing ever happened. Then I heard soft footsteps approaching. It was my wife. Alina walked over and handed me a cup of coffee. The moment she saw my face, she stopped in her tracks, eyes filled with concern. You okay? She asked gently, her voice full of care. I looked up and met her eyes, the eyes of the woman who had stood by me for nearly a decade, who knew me so well that one glance was all it took to know something was off. I gave a slight nod and said quietly, My mom called. My voice was still unsteady. Alina paused, clearly surprised. She sat down beside me, leaning in just a little. Your birth, Mom. I nodded, deep in thought. After 15 years. She called, to invite me to Everly's birthday party. Alina furrowed her brow, repeating it slowly, as if to make sure she heard right. I thought you didn't keep in touch with them anymore? I let out a long, heavy sigh that felt like it came from deep in my chest. I don't. But she said she got my number from a relative I used to talk to during those first few years after I left home. She said she's been quietly following my life from a distance. just never dared to reach out until now. Alina stared at me for a moment, then spoke, her voice low. And now they want you back. After all these years of silence. I nodded again. This time, there was a bitter edge in my eyes. Because it's Everly's 35th birthday. They say the whole family's gonna be there. And they want me to come too. A so-called reunion. I gave a dry, joyless laugh. There was nothing warm in it, only the taste of old pain. Alina didn't say anything right away. She just placed her hand gently over mine, holding it with her familiar warmth. Then, softly, she said, I know the pain from back then isn't easy to forget, but it's been 15 years, John. Maybe things have changed. If they're truly trying to make things right, maybe it's worth giving them a chance. And if they're not, at least you'll know. At least you won't keep wondering. I didn't answer. My eyes drifted toward the window. Outside, car lights flickered and danced across the living room wall. I heard Emma and Grace giggling as they watched a movie from the room down the hall. My real family, my world, was right here in this house. I murmured, primarily to myself, I don't know. I've gotten used to life without them. Alina turned toward me, her gaze calm and full of understanding. But if you don't go, will you ever stop wondering, what if things could have been different? I looked back at her, the woman who had seen every high and low of my life, who never once turned her back on me. I knew she wasn't asking me to forgive them no matter what. She just wanted peace for me. After a long pause, I gave a slow nod and said quietly but firmly, I'll think about it. Alina didn't say another word. She just leaned down and gently kissed my lips, then quietly walked into the kitchen. The door closed softly behind her, leaving me alone in the stillness, with only the ticking of the wall clock breaking the silence. I leaned back into the couch and closed my eyes, and then the memories came rushing in, so vivid. I could almost smell the familiar scent of food from the old kitchen in the house I grew up in, the place I used to call home, even though it never truly felt like mine. I remember being a kid and how Everly was always the perfect child to the adults. Everly has such a talent for drawing. She was born to be an artist. This painting needs to be entered in the city contest. And me? I was just John, the quiet little brother who sat alone with his toy cars or spent hours digging through old tools in the garage, taking things apart and putting them back together. No one ever called me creative. No one said I had passion. They just said I was odd, too quiet, and needed to be more social. At every family gathering, Everly was the star. She'd sit in the middle of the living room, playing guitar or showing off her latest artwork while everyone gathered around in awe. I'd sit in a corner, watching it all, wondering, do I even exist in this room? And during those moments, when Everly soaked in all the praise, my father would place a hand on my shoulder and say, you should try to be more like Everly. She's got talent and a clear direction. You mess around with toy cars all day. From family meetings to dinner conversations, from school stories to report cards. Every glance, every compliment, every ounce of hope and pride was reserved for Everly. And me, I slowly learned how to become a shadow, quiet, unassuming, invisible. I remember that day so clearly. I got my acceptance letter from the local community college. It was a 2-year automotive technology program. For the first time, I felt like I had found my own path, a real chance to chase something I cared about. I walked into the living room, letter in hand, heart pounding with excitement and hope. Mom was folding laundry. Dad was reading the newspaper. I stood in front of them and said, my voice almost trembling from how thrilled I was, I got accepted into the automotive tech program. They offered a partial scholarship, but I'll still need about $3,000 to cover the rest of the first year's tuition. I was hoping for a smile, a well done, even just a nod, but all I got was an odd silence. Dad lowered his paper, glancing at me over his glasses. Mom paused, looking at him like she was waiting for him to go first. Then Dad spoke, his voice firm, like he was reading from a script he'd already prepared. John, you know we're focusing our finances on Everly right now. She just got into an arts program in Europe. Your mom's already put down a deposit on her tuition and flights. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. What about me? I asked, my voice cracking. Mom let out a quiet sigh, her tone gentle but detached. Everly has a big opportunity, sweetheart. Well, it's automotive tech. You can always study that later or apply for more scholarships. Or work for a few years and save up. Dad nodded like it all made perfect sense. You can work and study. That's what I did back in the day. I stood there, still clutching the acceptance letter in my hand. Everything I had been so excited about suddenly felt pointless. To them, what I wanted didn't matter. I could always wait, do it later, figure it out. But for Everly, if she wanted something, the answer was always yes. That night, I packed my things. Just a worn-out backpack, a few changes of clothes, my beat-up shoes, and $300 I'd saved from working part-time at the garage down the road. No one stopped me. No one asked where I was going. No one walked me to the door. I left that house around dusk, just as a light rain began to fall. I remember turning back one last time, just once, then walking away without looking back. And from that moment on, I swore to myself, I would never ask them for anything again. Life after leaving home was a sharp turn. Cold, harsh, and unforgiving. In those early days, I wandered through neighborhoods on the city's edge, looking for work from morning till night. I lived off stale bread and slept on the waiting room bench of an old garage where I used to work part-time back in high school. The owner had retired, but the head mechanic Marco was still there. He was the first person to hand me an oil-stained rag and say, I don't care who you were before. If you're willing to work, that's all that matters. Scrub wheels, clean windows, vacuum the interiors. Can you handle that? I nodded without hesitation. That was all I needed, a chance. So I started with the dirtiest jobs. Scraping mud off rims, scrubbing gum off the floors, pushing cars out of the wash bay in the freezing winter. My hands cracked from the cold water. My nose went numb from the wind. But I never complained. Not once. I worked non-stop, morning shifts, evening shifts, whenever Marco needed someone. There were days it poured so hard the water soaked through my pant legs, icy and sharp, but I kept my head down, wiping down cars without a single complaint. Marco noticed. He didn't say much, but I could feel it. The way he looked at me changed gradually every day. Then came that Saturday afternoon. I was washing a black sedan when I heard a familiar laugh coming from the lot outside. I looked up, and my heart dropped. Everly. She stood there, arms crossed, wearing a designer coat and sunglasses, flanked by our two cousins, Max and Colin. The same two who used to make fun of me when we were kids. Well, John, Everly said with a smirk, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. Still scrubbing undercarriages, huh? I didn't say a word, just kept working, but my skin burned with shame. Max nudged Colin, glancing around the garage and shaking his head. This place reeks of oil. Can't believe someone chooses to stay in a dump like this their whole life. They laughed. They didn't need to spell it out. I knew exactly what they thought. I didn't respond. I stood up, grabbed the hose, and washed the mud off my hands. I was used to being looked down on. But seeing them there, laughing like nothing had changed, cut more profound than the winter wind howling outside. As I was drying the garage floor that night, my phone rang. It was the home number. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then answered. John! My dad's voice barked through the line, full of irritation. Why did you let your family see you doing that low-life job? I gripped the phone tighter, trying to stay calm. I'm working honestly. I don't steal. I don't owe anyone anything. I'm earning a living on my own. Washing cars, he snapped. Aren't you ashamed? People will think we failed to raise you right. The words caught in my throat. I swallowed hard and said slowly, I asked you and Mom to help me attend trade school once. Just a small amount. You said no. So now I'm doing it on my own. There was a brief silence. Then my mom cut in, her voice softer, but just as cold. You could still work and study at the same time, John. Your father did. No one forced you to choose this path. I let out a dry laugh, one with no trace of humor. Then why didn't Everly have to work and study? Why didn't you say that to her? Silence again. A moment later, my dad muttered flatly, do what you want, but don't expect us to introduce you as part of this family if you live like this. The line went dead. No goodbye. No, how are you? Just rejection all over again. About a week after that phone call from my parents, I was under an old pickup, changing the oil, when Marco walked in. He stood behind me for a long moment, arms crossed, just watching. I didn't notice until I heard his voice behind me. You work non-stop. I never asked for a day off. Never late. Even guys here for years don't keep up like that. I stood up and wiped my hands on a rag. I just want to do my part well, I said. Marco looked at me for a moment, thoughtful, then nodded toward a truck on the lift. That one's a V8. Old transmission system. You know how to strip and reassemble it. I shook my head. Never done it. But I can learn. He gave a slight nod. Good. Stay late tonight. I'll show you. That night was the first time I stepped into the central tech bay, the part of the garage I used to only clean and keep my distance from. Marco walked me through the basics. How to recognize engine noises, read spec sheets, check air filters, spark plugs, oil brakes. One step at a time. Over the following weeks, I kept doing daytime wash jobs, then stayed at night to learn the trade. Marco didn't say much, but I could feel it. He was starting to trust me. He let me watch the leading techs at work, slowly giving me small tasks, removing tires, checking pressure, inspecting belts. One evening, after we closed up shop, Marco handed me a piece of paper. Community Tech School. Night classes. In the 2-year program, you get certified at the end. I know the guy who runs it. If you're serious, I'll write you a recommendation. I took the paper in my hands, staring at the info, my hands trembling just a little. I can pay in installments, I said quietly. I'll work more hours. Marco waved a hand. Don't worry about that. I'll cover the first year. Call it an investment in future staff. But after that, you're on your own. I was speechless. Not because I was surprised someone offered help, but because, for the first time in my life, someone believed I was worth investing in. So I started school at night. Days in the garage. Evenings rushing to class. Cold noodles out of a Tupperware for dinner. Theory and hands-on work till late at night. Some days, I was so exhausted I passed out at the small table in the break room. But I never quit. Not once. 2 years passed faster than I ever expected. By day, I worked at the garage. At night, I was in class, studying automotive technology. On weekends, I carved out time to review theory and even picked up extra lessons in shop management and customer service. Things Marco told me. They won't teach you that in school, but it's what'll keep you in the game. Eventually, I was trusted with more complex jobs. Engine removals, ABS brake repairs, and using diagnostic tools for advanced issues. My name started appearing in the official tech assignment book, not as the helper or that kid who washes cars, but as a technician. A year after I got certified, Marco made it official. He promoted me to lead technician. You handle the tough jobs better than guys who've been here 10 years, he said during a quick team meeting. From now on, anything tricky goes to John. I couldn't help but smile. It wasn't just a title. It was validation. But Marco wasn't done yet. One early spring afternoon, as I was closing out the day's books in the back office, he stepped in and said, "Ever thought about running a shop?" I looked up, surprised. "Managing? You mean, like a branch?" Marco pulled up a chair, his tone serious. "I'm thinking about reopening our old location in East Brooklyn. It used to be my brother's shop. Now it's just sitting there, empty. The small 3 lifts, 1 tiny office. But I need someone solid to run it. And no one's more qualified than you." I sat there in silence for a few seconds. The phrase shop manager sounded both distant and full of pressure. "I've never managed anything before," I admitted. Marco leaned back, arms crossed with a small smile. "And I've never trained anyone the way I've trained you. But I see something in you. You have the skills, the drive, and most importantly, you listen to people. Everything else I can teach you." I swallowed hard and gave a nod. "I'll give it everything I've got." Marco stood up, placed a hand on my shoulder and said, "You don't have to give it everything. Just keep doing what you've been doing. The rest will come." 2 months later, I officially became the manager of the Brooklyn branch. I hired 2 technicians and 1 front desk staff member. I redesigned the waiting area myself and reorganized the tools and lifts based on what I'd learned in school. The first month's revenue wasn't high, but almost every customer returned. We offered honest service and fair pricing, and most importantly, I remembered every face and every car that came through those doors. Marco would stop by for routine checks, and each time he'd smile, genuinely pleased. 3 years after being manager, the Brooklyn branch wasn't just stable, it was thriving beyond expectations. Revenue grew steadily quarter after quarter, and our customer return rate was the highest in the system. I didn't just focus on repairs. I studied how to hire the right people, retain them, build a budget, run ads on social media, and create an authentic brand. Every time Marco came by to review the books, I saw the surprise and pride on his face. "You run a tighter ship than I ever did," he'd say, nodding with a satisfied smile. One Friday afternoon, Marco invited me back to the primary office after closing the shop. The space was small and softly lit, with that familiar smell of old coffee lingering in the air. He pulled open a drawer, took out a thin folder, and slid it across the desk toward me. "John, I'm planning to open a new branch on the city's north side," he said. "It's an up-and-coming neighborhood. Not many garages around. Big potential." I nodded. "That sounds like a great idea," but Marco didn't respond right away. He looked at me for a long moment, then said, "But I don't want to do it alone this time." I frowned, confused. Marco leaned forward, serious. "I want you to invest. Be my partner. 50-50. My heart stopped. "Me?" I stammered. "You've proven you've got what it takes," he said. "I'm not looking for someone to bring in a pile of money. I'm looking for someone who knows how to run a shop. Someone who cares about every customer, every bolt, every detail. You can take out a small business loan, I'll co-sign. I want to share this with someone, and I want that someone to be you." At that moment, as I looked down at the contract with the words co-owner printed at the top, it felt like I was watching a new chapter of my life unfold. I had once been the kid who walked away from home with nothing but a bag and a rag to wipe down wheels. Now, I was being invited to become part of something bigger, something I had built with my own 2 hands. I looked up, met Marco's eyes, and said, "I'm in." Our new branch opened that spring, right in a growing residential area on the north side of New York. The space wasn't big, but it sat on a busy street, just a few blocks from a new apartment complex still under construction. I handled hiring, setting up the workflow, and coordinating with suppliers. Marco stayed in the background, offering guidance when needed, but he gave me complete control. We didn't launch with flashy ads or grand openings. I just put up a simple sign out front. "We take care of your car like we take care of ourselves." It was just a slogan, but it was the philosophy I had learned from Marco. The first customer came out of curiosity. The second came because it was on their way. The third came because the first 2 had good things to say. 3 months later, we were fully booked every week. The new shop in the north was hitting its stride. I spent most of my time there, doing everything. Fixing cars, managing the team, talking to customers, answering phones. Everything I'd learned in my management courses suddenly felt real, and way more challenging than it ever looked on paper. I worked until 10 p.m. most nights. Some days, I'd sleep at the shop, grab a few hours on the break room couch, and then wake up early to catch the first drop-offs. But I never complained, because for the first time in my life, I was building something truly mine. Marco still dropped by every weekend. He'd review the books, check the tools, and give me sharp but thoughtful notes. Then, one afternoon, after looking over our monthly report, he looked up and said suddenly, "Have you thought about opening another branch?" I looked at him, caught off guard. He continued before I could answer, "We've got the resources. If this pace keeps up, we could open a new location every year. But this time, I want you to take the lead. You sign the lease. You run the show. I'll back you from behind the scenes." I looked at him, heart full of gratitude. "I'll give it serious thought," I said. Marco nodded. "Good. I'll be waiting for the good news." After that, I threw myself into expansion. Marco and I spent weeks scouting new locations, building standardized procedures for each shop, training staff, and tightening our finances. All those things I used to read about in textbooks, I was now applying in the real world, hands-on every single day. But it was right in the middle of all that chaos, when I was stretched thin, barely eating lunch most days, that I met Alina. Not at a party. Not through some friend of a friend setup. On a rainy afternoon, I was elbows deep in back-to-back repairs. Alina pulled up in an old hatchback, the engine making a knocking noise and warning lights blinking all over the dash. She stepped into the shop with tired eyes, clutching a folder full of paperwork, and asked, "Could you check it real quick? I've got a meeting I can't miss." I was the only one who wasn't tied up at that moment. I nodded, popped the hood, and gave it a quick look. "False sensor alert," I said without looking up. "Nothing serious. Just needs a reset and a cleanup on the connectors." Her eyes widened. "That's it?" A shop told me I needed to replace the whole system. I shrugged. "I don't replace what doesn't need replacing. I fix cars. I don't sell problems." She smiled. "Not the polite kind. A real one." "Well then," she said, "I owe you a coffee next time." I smiled back. "Black. No sugar." And sure enough, the next time she came back. 2 cups of black coffee, no sugar, and 2 breakfast sandwiches in a paper bag. "You skip breakfast, don't you?" "Thought so," she said, setting the bag on the front counter with a small smile. That's how we started, simple, easy, no show. Alina worked at a nearby community center and passed by the garage almost daily. Sometimes, she'd stop in just to ask a quick question about her car, but would end up staying until I locked the doors. I've never been excellent at expressing emotion, but with her, everything felt lighter. She didn't ask how much I made. She didn't care how many branches I had. She just listened, really listened. A few months later, I asked her to go with me to an outdoor screening of an old movie, something I hadn't done with anyone since leaving home. That night, she sat next to me, eyes quietly focused on the screen, and when her hand brushed mine, it was warm, steady, and full of trust. We got married a year later. No fancy ceremony, no grand hall, no extravagant gown. It was just a backyard wedding at a friend's place, surrounded by friends, co-workers, and Marco, the one man who had ever given me a second chance. Marco stood beside me as I waited for Alina to walk out. He gave my shoulder a firm pat and said quietly, "You've come a long way, John, from a kid scrubbing wheels to this." Then I saw Alina walking toward me in a simple white dress, her smile as gentle as the early morning sun. And right then, I knew. No matter how far my family had turned their backs, no matter how cold the past had been, I had finally found a place to call home. Alina and I have been married for 6 years now. Our 2 little girls, Emma, 5, and Grace, 3, are the sweetest miracles I've ever known. Every morning, their giggles echoing from the next room are all the motivation I need to start the day. Not for money or status, but simply because I know exactly what I'm living for. My life now is so peaceful. Sometimes I must remind myself it's real. We live in a spacious house in the western suburbs of New York, 3 bedrooms, a backyard big enough for the kids' slide and Alina's vegetable garden. I bought that house with the savings from the first 3 years after becoming a partner. No loans, no inheritance. No one else's name is on the deed. The car I drive now is a 7-seater SUV. Not to show off, but to take my whole family on weekend getaways. The old sports sedan I once dreamed of, still in the garage dusty now. Because these days, I'm busy being a father, a husband, and the owner of a life I once thought I'd never have. Every night after the girls are asleep, Alina and I sit out back, sipping hot tea, talking about things like whether to move Grace from preschool into a Montessori program, or should we hire another tech now that the new branch is about to open. We don't throw lavish parties. We don't eat at 5-star restaurants every week. But we have everything a family truly needs: love, respect, and a safe place to come home to. There was a time I dreamed my family would finally see that I'm no longer that quiet John living in Everly's shadow. But eventually I realized I don't need them to see it. I've made it this far, without them walking beside me. As I sat there, lost in thought, watching the sky outside turn a brilliant shade of orange, a small voice called out from the next room, "Daddy, my cake fell over." It was Emma, my 5-year-old, hard at work making toy cakes with her little sister. I chuckled and stood up, hurrying into the room. While Emma frowned at her lopsided foam cake, Grace was busy stirring milk in a pink plastic cup. I sat between them, gently straightening the toy cake, and kissed her forehead. "There you go, princess. Cake's all fixed now." "Thank you, Daddy," Emma beamed, throwing her arms around my neck. I looked at the 2 of them, these bright, pure little souls who had become the center of my world, and let out a long, quiet breath. Maybe it was time to close an old chapter. Not because they deserved forgiveness, but because I deserved peace. That night, while Alina was putting the girls to bed, I picked up my phone, scrolled to the number my mother had called from, and typed a single message, "I'll come." Then I hit send. The birthday party was set for Monday, exactly 1 week after my mother's call. After I sent my message confirming I would come, she replied with the address just minutes later. A new house in a residential area on the south side of the city. Everly's new place. She'd moved in not long ago. I didn't say anything to Alina right away. I just saved the address on my phone. And then Monday came. At 6 p.m., the 4 of us stood at the front gate of that house. I stepped out of the car and looked up. 2 stories, porch lights glowing, simple flag garlands and balloons decorating the front. Bright and cheerful, almost theatrical. The door was already open, voices and laughter spilling out. Lively, familiar, and yet strangely distant. I reached for Alina's hand. She gave me a soft nod, her eyes calm and steady. I knelt to retie Emma's shoelace, brushed a strand of hair from Grace's forehead, and stood tall. "Let's go," I said. Let them see what a real family looks like. I stepped through the doorway with a steadier heart than I expected. My left hand held tightly onto Alina's. My right rested gently behind Emma and Grace. It is a natural reflex of a father to shield his family. The inside of the house was bright, almost blinding. The mix of perfume and party food created that familiar, artificial scent I remembered from old family gatherings. Polished, showy, but never sincere. The living room was vast and decorated with balloons, ribbons, and a large sign that read, "Happy Birthday, Everly, the family's precious gem." I nearly laughed. Everly's voice rang out from the dining area, crisp and confident, surrounded by a cluster of familiar relatives. The same ones once called me the odd one, or the kid who washes cars. The sound of the door shutting behind us caught their attention. Heads turned. A brief pause, like someone had pressed the mute button. Then the whispers began. Slow, predictable, eyes darting from person to person, faces shifting between surprise, disbelief, and discomfort. "John?" My mother's voice cut through the silence. She quickly set down a tray of pastries and stepped forward, her expression flustered and awkward, like she hadn't believed I would come, let alone bring my whole family. "It's you." I gave a slight nod. "Yeah, it's me." I glanced around the room and offered a polite, reserved smile. "Hello, everyone." Alina gave a respectful nod beside me. The girls clung to her side, peeking shyly from behind her legs, just like any kids in a room full of strangers. The living room seemed to hold its breath. Then my aunt, the one who once said, "John never quite fit in with this family," stepped forward with a stiff smile. "Oh, John, it's been a while, huh? And who are these little ones?" I knelt, gently brushing Emma's hair from her face. "My daughters, this is Emma, and that's Grace." No one quite knew what to say next. Just then, Everly turned around. She was holding a glass of red wine. Her eyes scanned me from head to toe, pausing briefly on the crisp white button-down I'd chosen that morning. In her gaze, I could read it all. Surprise, yes, but also irritation. "John," she said, smiling, "but not really. You came." I held my smile, small, calm, grounded. "Mama invited me, and it's been a long time." Everly nodded, her eyes flicking toward Alina and the kids, assessing, comparing, and looking for something to critique. "Come in, make yourself at home," she said, stepping aside. I led my wife and children in, guiding them to a table near the window. Not in the center, but not hidden either, just enough distance to observe without being swallowed by the performance. No one asked much else. They just watched, like they were trying to figure out how the quiet, forgotten boy, the one they wrote off, mocked, left behind, I was now standing here, unshaken, whole, with a family of his own. And maybe that quiet, undeniable presence, that was what unsettled them the most. Everly's birthday party unfolded precisely as I'd imagined, loud, artificial, and centered around one person, my sister. She was mid-story, talking about some art project out on the East Coast, when she suddenly turned to me. With that familiar half-smirk, she raised her voice just enough for the whole room to hear. "John, so you're still washing cars, huh?" The words cut through the air like a slap. The room went silent. I could feel the eyes turning toward me, a few tight-lipped smiles, sideways glances full of unspoken things. But I didn't get angry. I didn't feel embarrassed. I reached into my wallet, pulled out a thick, embossed, silver-edged business card with the Vanguard Auto Center's logo in the corner, and placed it gently on the table before the nearest guest. "Mind passing this to Everly for me?" I said calmly. The card began to make its way around the table. Some glanced at it in silence. Others read it carefully, then looked back at me like they were seeing something entirely new. When it reached my cousin Matt, the same one who once laughed out loud watching me scrub bumpers back in the day, he squinted, reading aloud, "Vanguard Auto Centers? What is this?" Then he pulled out his phone and started typing. The room was so quiet you could hear his fingers tapping the screen. And then, Matt shot up from his seat, eyes wide in disbelief. "Yo, this is real," he nearly shouted. John Hamilton, co-founder and CEO of the biggest auto service chain in New York State. 12 locations, he's in Business Weekly. "Dude, there's even photos." All eyes locked on him. No one was eating. No one was speaking. Matt, now more excited than I was, kept reading out loud from the top of the search results. "John Hamilton is the co-founder and CEO of Vanguard Auto Centers. a statewide network of auto maintenance and repair centers known for top-tier customer service and industry-leading technician training programs. Then he slowly lowered the phone and turned to me, half grinning in disbelief. "That's you." I nodded once. Slowly. "That's me." Everly was still standing, wine glass frozen in her hand, lips parted but speechless. Her face had drained of its usual glow, no more smugness or control. I turned to her, my voice calm but clear. "You're not wrong. I did wash cars. And from that rag, I cleaned off every trace of the past." Then I looked around the room, at all the faces that once dismissed me, ignored me, left me behind, now staring, stunned, unsure what to do with the version of me standing before them. "I'm not here for praise. I don't need anyone's pride. I want you all to know, I'm still John, just not the John you remember." I stood up, gently lifting Grace, who had dozed off in my arms, then reached for Emma's hand. "Alina, let's go." My wife rose beside me, eyes steady, just as calm as when we walked in. The room stayed silent. The only sound was our footsteps as we made our way out, strong, sure, not needing anyone's approval. Behind me, I heard my mother's voice call out, "John, I'm proud of you. I paused, didn't turn around. I just said loud enough for the whole room to hear, "So the first time you're proud is when Google confirms it." Then I walked out, pushed open the door, and left behind a party where no one was laughing anymore. The next morning, I woke up just like any other day. Sunlight poured softly through the kitchen curtains. Alina was at the counter making breakfast. The girls were still sound asleep in their room. Everything was quiet, peaceful, precisely like the feeling I carried when we left that party the night before. At 8 a.m., my phone started buzzing on the table. Once, twice, then again. They'd found my number. It was printed on the back of the business card I'd handed out, beneath the Vanguard Auto Centers logo, under the title co-founder and CEO. The messages came in one after another. "John, last night was just a misunderstanding. Everyone's proud of you. You did great. Caught us all by surprise. Can we talk? Your mom wants to reconnect. We should try to heal. Everly's upset. Could you have been a little gentler?" I scrolled through them all. Didn't respond. Not out of anger. Not because I was hurt, but because I'd already moved on. 15 years ago, I was the one hoping they'd call, hoping they'd check in. I'm hoping for a single word of recognition. Now, they were the ones reaching out, trying to hold on to something they once so quickly let go. Alina walked over, handed me a cup of coffee, and gently touched my shoulder. "More messages?" I nodded, taking a slow sip. "Ever since they found out I don't scrub tires anymore," I said. "They suddenly remember how to say family." She smiled softly, saying nothing. I just gave my shoulder a quiet squeeze, enough to remind me, my real family is right here. No need to look anywhere else. That afternoon, as I reviewed the launch plan for our 13th branch in Long Island, my phone rang. Unknown number. No name. No clue. I let it ring 3 times before answering. "John?" Everly's voice came through, softer than usual, missing its usual edge. "I know. I didn't handle things right last night. I'm sorry. Really. I didn't mean for it to get so tense." She paused, but in the background, I caught faint murmurs. I narrowed my eyes. She had me on speaker. And just as I suspected, my mother's voice cut in. "Sweetheart, I want to talk too. I know I haven't been fair over the years, but I want the family to be close again." Then came my father's voice, low and trying too hard to sound reasonable. "We're family, John. Nobody's perfect, but you shouldn't hold a grudge forever over the past." Before I could respond, Everly chimed in again, her voice quiet but crystal clear. I'm dealing with a bit of financial trouble. One of my art projects lost its funding. If you could help, maybe just a loan around $100,000. I'd pay it back in time." I froze just for a second. Before I could even react, my mother rushed in. "Yes, dear. Helping your sister is helping the family. It's not like we're strangers. We're your people." My voice came out steady low, but every word landed sharp. "No family," I said, slow and precise, "would pour everything into one child's overseas dream and tell the other to figure it out independently." "Don't say that," my mother fumbled. "Back then things were different. And now," I cut in, "I will block every number tied to this family. If you contact me again, or my wife, or contact my company. I'll involve the police. Silence. Long and deep. Then my father's voice came back. No longer calm but bitter and biting. You should be thanking me. If I had helped you back then, maybe you wouldn't be where you are today. I smirked and replied slowly, Thank you, Thomas Hamilton. Then I hung up. Not Dad. Not Father. Just Thomas Hamilton. A man who once brought me into the world, but never once lived up to the word father. I blocked the number, blocked every follow-up message as they came in. Then I stepped out into the backyard, where Emma and Grace were laughing, chasing each other in the golden light of the late afternoon. And in that moment there was nothing left to prove, nothing to explain, only this, only them, and the life I had built without ever needing to look back. It's been a month since that birthday party. Life has returned to its quiet rhythm. If anything, it feels even lighter now. No more messages, no more calls, no more lingering cuts from the past trailing behind me like shadows I forgot I was still carrying. And I know I made the right choice, not because I wanted to sever ties, but because some relationships, if held on to too long, only keep you from ever becoming yourself. Family, real family, should be where you're loved, heard, accepted, even before you succeed. But if family is the first place to turn its back on you, how can you blame yourself for finally turning yours? I have no regrets. Only one quiet wish: that thing could have started from a place of fairness and love instead of favoritism and expectation. And before I wrap up today's story, I want to ask you, the incredible listeners who stayed with me to the end, was I wrong to walk away from the people who share my blood? Drop a comment below. I genuinely want to hear your thoughts. And if this story meant something to you, if it made you pause, reflect, or feel something real, don't forget to hit subscribe, leave a like, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Your support means the world to us. It's what keeps us going, telling stories that aren't sugar-coated or shiny, but honest enough to touch the heart. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the following story.